Alright, everybody, it's our Klaus here, and the wait is over, and I am incredibly excited to be presenting what I honestly feel is one of the most important bodies of research that I have presented, and so I ask that you see this all the way through to the end to truly understand the scope and overall significance of the things that I wish to reveal and convey today. So, along our wide ranging journey of topics today, there will be things you agree and things you disagree with. And all I ask is that in those disagreements, you do not dismiss the entirety of this research. Again, even if you do not appreciate or understand some of the methods that I use, it does not by any means negate their overall significance and importance in the elite occultic circles they are used and construct our reality in. So really that conscious dismissal is just, I guess, signaling a increasing comfort of having wool over one's eyes. But with that being said, let's identify our centerpiece for today's presentation, and it is Oliver Stone's masterful 1994 film, Natural Born Killers. Now, notice on the title shot here, we do have the blood raining down from the skies, and so there's going to be a number of apocalyptic themes throughout this as we dissect not only the symbolism of this film and the controversy surrounding it, but I'm going to also use this as a platform to talk about some issues with the history of psychiatry and genetics in our modern world, and why I feel we should always be apprehensive towards how mental health issues are presented to us. But so, of course, countless other things along the way. So let's get started and check the pulse of the beast here using the Google News tab. And in typing in natural born killers, you see the first result ties it in to an article with what will undoubtedly be one of the largest films in cinematic history, Avengers Endgame. But then as you scroll through, and of course Robert Downey Jr. starring in both films, but you see these articles from noteworthy publications such as Newsweek and The Atlantic, and furthermore that they're published on dates that I have been flagging for you in previous videos. But I want you to notice this article that was published on February 27th because it asks, how far is too far? And that really just caught my attention because for those of you who saw my Joe Rogan video, I used the interview with him and Alex Jones on that date of February 27th as the launch board for that, because Rogan continually referred to critical thinkers as schizophrenics and conspiracy theorists, and I made the claim that he was working to normalize the dismissal of people who challenge the official narrative of things and to, again, support the outright disregard of what they bring to the table. So then all the while you have this story brewing with Alex Jones and the families from the Sandy Hook incident who were looking to hang him out to dry, right? So goes the narrative. So of course, Jones blames his Sandy Hook's claims on psychosis. And the first thing that should come to your mind is, what is psychosis? And just so happens this article was last updated on the 5-year anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting. But you see here that psychosis means a loss of contact with reality. It is a symptom of a number of mental illnesses rather than a medical condition in its own right. So that means we could see an unfolding saga with Alex Jones here. So notice that psychosis is classically associated with schizophrenia spectrum disorders. It is one of the defining criteria for schizophrenia, the very thing that I had flagged Rogan on in that video. And you see how this all just comes in just full circle here. Now, the plot really thickens when we see that the attorneys released that deposition footage to YouTube on the 88th day of the year, March 29th, which I also directly pointed out in that video weeks before. So again, that was also the first day the National Emergency Management Association began their mid-year forum, and again, they play a very heavy hand in shaping national policy regarding, you guessed it, emergency management. But so again, the narrative they're building there is they're going to up the ante in the psychological warfare. Now notice as well that 2 of these articles back here come out on March 29th. Okay, one based on the film, and then one based in reality, a gang, natural born killers, all right? And so that's one of the things this film does, is straddle the line of reality and fiction. And again, there is a tremendous amount to be said on that, but I really want to keep moving along here. So how does this all tie in to, right, Jones and Sandy Hook and the movie? So take a look at this article from BuzzFeed. The Sandy Hook shooting was on December 14th, 2012. So this is published 7 days later on 12/21. Again, you add those for 33. And you see here that they reference an NRA press conference in which the executive vice president directly links the Sandy Hook massacre, quote, to blood-soaked films out there like American Psycho and Natural Born Killers. So of course this film is always been surrounded by controversy. There are numerous quote-unquote copycat crimes, and of course the most infamous event, again this is a highly contentious one as well, linked to the film, is the Columbine High School shooting. You can see here the quote from Eric Harris, said to have referred to the day they conducted this massacre as the holy morning of NBK. And so of course this is something that is also still kept in the mainstream. I believe there's a play about it or something or other coming out right now. So what I want to do here though is start to bridge the gap so that we can talk about this genetic component to all this argument and how it ties into some very shady organizations. So take a look here. People ask the question, are some just natural born killers? And again, this photo of the alleged Adam Lanza, and that article cites this one from Popular Science. And what they do here is they examine the story from 2006 of Bradley Woldrup, a man from southeastern Tennessee, who one night snapped, and upon his estranged wife and friend returning to the house, he lost it, drew his gun, shot the friend 8 times, and then cut her head open with his knife. He then proceeded to chase his wife with said knife and a machete into the trailer and told the children to tell their mother goodbye. Fortunately, she was able to get away. 3 years later, he finds himself in court admitting to the entire thing, saying that he snapped and wasn't proud of it, facing felony murder and the death penalty. So what his lawyers did is they took a sample of his blood and sent it to a molecular genetics lab and found that he had a genetic variant on his X chromosome that coded the enzyme monoamine oxidase A. So you can see here the job of that is to break down crucial neurotransmitters, and if it's left unchecked, those potent chemicals can build up in the brain and cause a loss of impulse control and an increase in violence and rage. Now, of course, this is a highly controversial line of research because, and rightfully so, a lot of emphasis is put on the environment as being the utmost important variable that influences the expression of our genes. And of course, this would lead us down a discussion of epigenetics, which I'm not necessarily looking to have here. But what I want you to see is they go on to discuss the purpose of this sort of research and trying to identify violent people before they're able to hurt others. And they say that in this, you come across uncomfortable questions, conjuring the quackery of phrenology and the eugenics of the Nazis. Now, before I delve into that, I want to point out this misdirection from them here, and if you'll just give me one moment. Alright, so they say that the modern search for the genetic roots of violence began in 1978 with a woman going into a Netherlands hospital seeking help for her brothers and her son suffering from what she felt to be a severe mental disability. Now, I say that's a misdirection because when we examine history a bit, we come across this man, Emil Kraepelin, and the Encyclopedia of Psychology identifies him as the founder of modern scientific psychiatry, psychopharmacology, and psychiatric genetics. Now, if you notice his birth and death dates there from 1856 to 1926, this is well before the 70s. Now, when we begin to look into Emil, and let's not hold anything back here. This is a known eugenicist and supporter of the Nazi Party. But I want to show you here that in the founding of what is now referred to as the German Institute for Psychiatric Research, originally established in 1917, he was able to bring about this institution through the donation of one James Loeb. And I think it's really important that we identify that James was the son of Solomon Loeb, and Solomon was the co-founder of Kahn, Loeb, and Co. So you can see here that it grew to be one of the most influential investment banks in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, going on to become the principal rival of J.P. Morgan. So huge sums of money on the table here. And you can see that they acted as the leading investment house for John D. Rockefeller, and also assisted him in his international investments as well. So very important organization, and it's very important for us to also acknowledge that the Rockefellers directly promoted this institution as well, right? Not just through the money of James and his connection to his father's business, but you can see here that the 1928 additional building added on was financed primarily by a $325,000 donation from the Rockefellers. And again, that's 1920s money. So they really wanted this institution to be built. And I want you to hold on to its date of February 13th as its original founding place, because that is very important. But before we get into the other individuals that were involved with this, let's go back to Kraepelin here for a moment, because again, he's an incredibly important individual in this discussion of the natural born killer. So I do want you to see that he retired at the age of 66, and again actively promoted the policy and research agenda of racial hygiene and eugenics. But take a look at this here from the 6th edition of one of his textbooks. There's a section on moral insanity. And he talks about a disorder of the emotions or moral sense without apparent delusions or hallucinations. Kraepelin defined it as a lack or weakness of those sentiments which counter the ruthless satisfaction of egotism. This has been described as a psychiatric redefinition of Cesar Lombroso's theories of the born criminal. In 1904, Kraepelin changed the section heading to the born criminal and added it to the new chapter on psychopathic personalities. So now again, connecting this idea of this existing for some time, and of course the other really big contribution that was made by Kraepelin was the classification of schizophrenia. And you can see here that it remains relatively unknown to the general public. And again, this connecting back to Rogan. But now notice as well, it says that his views now dominate many quarters of psychiatric research and academic psychiatry, as he laid the foundation for the DSM and the ICD diagnostic manuals. Again, those are what govern mental health. And you have a eugenicist Nazi as the man who came up with them. Now, let's go back here, because this institution was not always run by Kraepelin. When he retired, he handed the reins over to Ernst Rudin. Now, as you can see here, Rudin has long been scientifically honored and cited internationally as the pioneer of psychiatric inheritance studies. He also argued for, designed, justified, and funded the mass sterilization and clinical killing of adults and children. Now, you'll notice here in his early years, he worked as the assistant to Eugene Bleuler. Now, this is interesting because this is the other man said to have termed the phrase schizophrenia. And if you look into him, you see that he is a Swiss psychiatrist and also a eugenicist. That is the whole point here with these diseases, pointing out that the men who are discovering them are also in agreement that they need to eradicate those that they feel could compromise the integrity of the society through them. Now, check this out. You can see that the Institute incorporated a Department of Genealogical and Demographic Studies, which was the first in the world specializing in psychiatric genetics. So you also find in 1924 that this institute came under the umbrella of the prestigious Kaiser Wilhelm Society. You can see here the Nazis' scientific arm, essentially, as you can see here, directly connected to their operations and helping to provide funding, all of those great things. And when you read on here, you see the American Rockefeller Foundation funded numerous international researchers to visit and work at Rudin's psychiatric genetics department as late as 1939. So the point that we're obviously making here is it's very clear that Rudin and his research on schizophrenia, the overall diagnosing of natural-born killers, on, supported strongly by Nazi powers. And you see here his ideas for reducing new cases of schizophrenia would prove a total failure, despite between 73 and 100% of the diagnosed being sterilized and killed. So now you'll see that even in spite of that, he was awarded the Goethe Medal for Art and Science, handed to him personally by Hitler, honoring him as the pioneer of the racial hygienic measures of the Third Reich. Wow. Hitler later also calling him the pathfinder in the field of hereditary hygiene. And so, again, this is the foundation for all of this going on here in the States, right? Because Kraepelin, the man who tutored him, set forth the blueprints for the diagnostic manuals, which still exist, and arguably created the disorder. That's all these are. right? It's creations, implications. But notice here one last note on Rudin, talking about the Max Planck Institute openly receiving government funding designed to further the Nazi regime's aims. And some of those funds seem to have gone on to support the work of Julie Duasson and Carl Schneider. And it involved clinical research involving the killing of children, again, which we indicated earlier on. But so, again, in tracing out this idea, you'll notice that the man who described the early stages of schizophrenia, Klaus Conrad, is also a Nazi Party member. And so most noteworthy here is apophenia, the tendency to mistakenly perceive connections and meaning between unrelated things. Now, how convenient that we have members of the Nazi Party, an organization that came to power through a false flag operation that would be exposed by tracing out minute connections and unraveling the scheme, are the ones master helming the creation of mental disorders that allow for people to be killed over their questioning of narrative. Now look at this. I mean, this is no exaggeration. This is still, in Wiki, referred to as a lunatic asylum. And again, the connections to the moon. But you see here, psychiatrists around the world have been involved in the suppression of individual rights by states wherein the definitions of mental disease had been expanded to include political disobedience. You can see further here the diagnosis of mental disease can serve as proxy for the designation of social dissidents, allowing the state to hold persons against their will and to insist upon therapies that work in favor of ideological conformity and in the broader interests of society. That's some scary shit. All right, and of course it directly referenced things with the Nazis and numerous other countries. Now, I've got to point out here the Schutzstaffel, because I also called Rogan out on his SS lightning bolts on his logo, and of course this agency forming on that ever important April 4th, again the date the World Trade Center's open, MLK assassinated, David Blaine born, a million other critical things that we've discussed. But so, with all of that being out of the way and kind of looking at those origins, let's shift gears here and let's talk about the film Natural Born Killers. And I have so incredibly much information to go over here. I'm going to be moving pretty swiftly on this portion. I'm going to ask you to follow along with me, check out things that I've written out, because I'm not going to articulate all of it, but it is all here for you. So again, give me just one moment and we'll get started. All right, so I hope you are ready. Let's get into this here. So we're going to be looking at this in such an incredibly unique lens that I'm going to leave you a more straightforward breakdown of this movie. I think this is a wonderful analysis, and I highly encourage you to check out this link. But let's get into this here, and really the reason that this is pulled up on the screen is he has this great line about the strategically placed images, products, and objects seen throughout the entirety of Natural Born Killers, evoking a strong emotional response in the viewer, and it brings to mind the psychology behind propaganda. So again, it's very interesting to think about that, because Wayne Gale, the man who represents the mainstream media in this film, has a simple value of 93, which is the same as propaganda, as well as fear factor and a whole list of other things that we'll talk about. So in looking at this movie, it's really important that we identify a few things right off the bat here. First of all, it is a story about love, and the idea of love is the law. Now, what I really want to get into is the fact that 2019 is going to mark the 25th anniversary of this film's release, originally August 26th in 1994. So the main plot of this movie is Mickey and Mallory on their infamous 52-person killing spree. So of course we see the obvious mirror there in the anniversary and the number of people killed in the film. You will also notice here that in the opening shot you do have the nice 52 on the cafe sign in which we see Mickey and Mallory for the first time. So of course you can see these codings written out on the screen here, 52 being the Jewish value for NBK and the simple value for NWO and devil. Again, a concept very heavily referenced throughout this film, which we will touch on quite a bit. But so notice here as well, obviously we add those mirrored numbers together and we get 77. Now, for any number of reasons, this is an incredibly important number. Let's start with the fact that the film's director, Oliver Stone, went to Yale on 2 separate occasions. And so, of course, here we see that nice Y, the 25th letter, and we reduce it down to 7. We have 2 of them, so there's our nice 77, and of course the one-eyed symbolism, the connections to skull and bones. The live action version of that mascot ups the ante with a nice 33 across his chest there. So all of that, of course, incredibly interesting, but also remember book 77, otherwise known as Liber Oz. And it details the law of the strong, which we have discussed quite a bit in the past. And of course, you can see here all of the connections to the 666 and the symbolism of that logo. But what I want you to remember as well is when we look into the coding, and you do have on the right side of your screen a good recap on 227, so please don't let that go to waste. But notice here that when we're looking up book 77, it does have the same coding as my name, the apocalypse, global control, geriatric shit, all the big key pieces that we have really been honing in on here. And the other thing that we really need to address here is just the idea of the law of the strong, because later in the movie Mickey says that only the vicious survive, and he actually says this right before the prison riot begins. We'll get into that in much more detail later on, but again, just the importance of that number. And of course, I'll leave you, I actually want to show you something here. I'm going to leave you this link over here so that you can get a better glimpse of the number 216. We talk about it at length here. Of course, when we reduce down the 666, it does give us that 216, but there are a tremendous amount of other important components to it, especially in its relation, to being the number of the beast. You also see the number 616 referenced, and bear that in mind. But 216 also being the perimeter of the alpha and omega sections of the wisdom star. So again, all of the incredibly important things I want you to be aware of with this number, because it is going to be playing a pretty major role as we really coast through this information. So let me get back up to where we're supposed to be here. All right, and we're still just on this damn 77. So let me finish this out by showing you that in the opening images still of the movie, we're shown this 77, which to me is them flagging what I am talking about here. And you see it is connected to the old detective show 77 Sunset Strip. And so, of course, interestingly, If we type in Sunset Strip, you do see it has that August 11 coding, as well as just connections to that Rogan video. I really could have just left the screen here, right? But so the other bit that follows that is this shot of Nixon giving his resignation speech. And so, of course, we have discussed Nixon quite a bit. His name is an anagram for N. Knox, again, the Knight of Pan, and that is pronounced just the same as Mickey and Mallory Knox. So again, all the things that you could look into on the right side of your screen, but looking back to the left, I just want you to see that simple value of 77 does give us our reference to the caduceus, and again, this is indeed found on the Devil Tarot card in the Thoth deck. But I do want to leave you with a little more information here just to see that it is a symbol of dualistic nature, right? Of opposing currents of universal magnetism. One snake represents creativity, while the other one represents fire, which destroys in order to recreate and regenerate. So I'll leave you this link here because I do think it's good to have a fundamental understanding of these symbols that we see. And again, all throughout this film, this is after Mickey and Mallory have conducted a blood ritual for their marriage on the, I believe, Rio Grande Bridge. And again, their blood drops into the water, turning into two snakes, which intertwine. Of course, outside of the drugstore, which they are apprehended after the holdup goes wrong with the silent alarm. And of course, they were bit by two snakes, which led them to be there. Mickey has this tattooed across his chest, so on and so forth. It's very, very important symbolism. So again, you can see some of the numerology with that number 77, how it can give us reference to both the Death card and the Emperor card. Again, progression from Law and Order is how we would read that. Now notice that the director's cut came out, of course, in 2009. Big year we've been looking at. It was on October 13th. You see the reductions there to 33 and that important 113, which will be coming up quite a bit in a moment here. But how I want you to connect this is that, remember my Walt Whitman video? We discussed that on October 14th, Hillary Clinton unveiled a statue of Walt Whitman, America's poet, in Moscow. And of course, Walt Whitman on the 33rd edition of the World and Economist cover behind Putin. So again, you can see the date reduction there to 33 as well. And again, just the interesting idea with the time differences that could more or less be seen as the same day. One other thing worth mentioning here, since we are going to be seeing so much of that 2009 today, not only does it connect to the idea of, right, the completion of a cycle and that we are in this huge state of transition in the world right now, but when you drop the zeros, it gives you the number 29, which, as you can see on the right side of your screen, does connect with major pieces we'll talk about today. Pasadena, California, the Saturn cult. Again, there's your Skull and Bones, Leaves and Grass, all of it's over there. So, and again, there's your 25 written out. And of course, this is under the powerful JRE coding. And of course, his podcast also launching in 2009. But so, what I do want to point out here, because Woody Harrelson is my person of interest in this movie, is that in 2009, he was in 3 major motion pictures, and I feel like there's a very strong theme established throughout these 3 films. So you can see here in Zombieland, the first one released, which was 88 minutes. It's a post-apocalyptic world, and it was caused by mad cow disease. You can see the coding here, 13-letter phrase, and those references to Don Trump, a new era of magic, that David Blaine. And then you also see, of course, blood, sacrifice, and false flag flood, tying us back to my story of OJ research. But now notice these other 2 movies, both released on November 13th, in a date that we could reduce to 333 or 44. But in the first, the messenger, TM 20 and 13 is 33. He plays somebody who mentors another on how to deliver the news of death. And then in 2012, he plays a character who warns people of impending death on an apocalyptic scale. Of course, right, this is Emmerich's kind of magnum opus disaster film. And so, of course, you can see all of the other bits I have for you in here. And I will point out that in Zombieland, the film does start with an inverted American flag, the Capitol exploding, and then Woody Harrelson in a car with a nice 33 across it. So let's jump back here, though. I want you to see the tagline from the film, from 2012. It's "We Were Warned." And again, these references to all these key characters, Walt Whitman, the number 216 written out, that April 4th date, and then Trauma Room 1. There's going to be a lot of JFK discussion coming up here. Now, what's really interesting to me in staying tuned with our 10 research is that the sequel to Zombieland is coming out this year, 10 years later, and Harrelson's going to be in another Emmerich film, which I actually talked about 6 months ago, in connections with the Sopranos and the Trump card and the second 9/11. Anyways, that movie, Midway, is slated to come out on November 8th. How very interesting. So we'll come back to that again later and check out that Sopranos video. So let's get back to NBK here, because we have still got a ways to go. So again, as we noted earlier, Entertainment Weekly puts it as the most controversial movie of the 90s, or excuse me, the fuck was the quote? #1 movie of the 90s, 8th most controversial, excuse me. But take a look at Entertainment Weekly here, because their first issue came out on February 16th, 2/16, 29 years ago. And of course, EW reduces to 55. Now, we can of course see here those rankings that 1 and 8 give us the moon card in 18, which is also the number of letters in Natural Born Killers. And if we mirror that number, we have our references to sex, magic, rituals, Mason, on and on. But take a look at the coding here for Natural Born Killers, because it is very tasty in all senses, right? The World Economic Forum shares that coding, at which David Blaine spoke on the 33rd day of the government shutdown. The Joe Rogan Experience here, references to the true holy angels of death and impossible coincidences. Now notice as well the references to Trump and the date of April 23rd. There's that 113 again, as it's the 113th day. And of course, do notice the 666 coding. Now, the 666 is found all throughout the Natural Born Killers movie. Of course, they go down Interstate 666. The man Owen in the beginning, who in the alternate ending ends up killing Mickey and Mallory, is reading the 666 there. And there's one more that I'll show you later on. But again, notice here the values for NBK that'll come up again later, especially in regards to 27. Of course, critical to note that the movie just so happens to be 119 minutes in length. Of course, your nice inverted 9/11. Of course, 11/9 was actually the day that the vote was officially in, that Trump won the presidency back in 2016. So you've got all that riding on it. But so take a look at this here, though. Reference again here to Holy Morning of NBK, because I want you to see this. Connections not only to that September 13 day, but what I want you to see here is its connection to the coding for President Trump, the second 9/11, the elephant in the room, right? Choosing greatness, the name of his State of the Union, all the things. Terrorist attack, you name it. It's all in here. So now, this film released August 26th, 2 and 6, of course, 26 victims in the Sandy Hook shooting, however we want to go about that. But do notice it gives us that nice 88, of course, coding for Trump, false flag, pangolin, you name it. Woody Harrelson, who was 33 when the movie was released, has, of course, those initials, the 23rd and 8th letter for that nice 238. Of course, we can add those letters, and it gives us 13, the death card. But notice here that from his birth date to the release of the film, he was 12,088 days. The 12th tarot card, of course, the Hanged Man, the sacrificial card, and again, that 88. Now, I also think it's worth noting that him and his dad have the same birthday, which is July 23rd. Could be arranged as 237, and we have really honed in on that number in connection to all of this. So we'll come back to that later on. Again, notice with Woody here, I don't want to spend too much time on his coding, but I will point out, since bowling does come up and he did star in the movie Kingpin, that all of this information, again, is highly relevant. You can see the connections to our 33rd president, Truman, who died at the age of 88, the first one to put a bowling alley in the White House. All of the things, again, in 1947, you can see how that connects to the establishment of the NSA, Department of Defense, and CIA. But I've talked about that in the past. Now, I do want to highlight this date of December 17th, because I did talk about that date a lot in the past, and if we look at from the film's release to that date this year, you see that not only is it, of course, that 25 years, but 3 months, 22 days, that Skull and Bones number, or 3 times 22 for that 66. Again, they also are driving down Route 66. Of course, in the months and days, you can drop that 0, and you've got a nice 33 and 22. So, what else to say, right? Very interesting that Woody Harrelson and Robert Downey Jr. share the same coding, again, as Woody's character does kill Downey in the film. Now, it's very important that Woody was in this movie. As you can see in this article here, Oliver Stone originally wanted Michael Madsen to play that role, but the studio offered him an extra $20 million to cast Woody Harrelson, and so of course he did. Now, in understanding why they did that, and again thinking about this idea of the film blurring the line between fiction and reality, you see here that Woody's dad was a American organized crime figure convicted of the assassination of federal judge John H. Wood Jr., the first federal judge to have been killed in the 20th century. So you can go through here and see the controversy around that case. Woody, always an advocate for his father in that, the man who put Charles up for that, originally turned over his initial, right, statement. But in any case, let's hone in on this JFK bit here, because it says in a standoff in 1980, not only did Charles threaten suicide, but he stated he had killed both Judge Wood and President JFK. So of course he goes on to say that he was under stress at the time, and so he was just trying to elongate his life. But very interestingly, there is a mountain of research that says that he was actually one of the 3 tramps at the grassy knoll during JFK's assassination. So, I don't know. I think it's real interesting. But let's look at the names of these characters in the film. So Mickey is an abbreviation of Michael and Mika, meaning who is like God or gift from God. Now, it is very interesting because Mickey, of course, does have the tattoo of Christ on his arm, which does stand in contrast to Mallory's scorpion tattoo. Again, these dualistic forces here, and of course the scorpion connected to the death card. But do notice that in this scene showcasing these tattoos, it ends on the yin and the yang. Again, just like the caduceus. So again, notice here that when we think of Mickey, you cannot help but think of Mickey Mouse. And that is absolutely by design, I'm sure, in Oliver Stone turning upside down how we typically, right, process things. But then when you look at the coding for Mickey, it is that simple value of 66, and it is also the same as Moloch, the ancient deity that children were sacrificed to. Wow, kind of just like how we sacrifice, right, minds to the mount. Man, you see it. So you see all of these other major pieces in here as well, such as planned, event, and new era. Now notice that Mallory means the unfortunate or the unlucky one. Mickey refers to her as Mal, of course, meaning bad or evil. If we look at her coding there, she does have the connections to MK Ultra, Freemasons, Doomsday, and so much more. So as stated, Nox, a clear reference to the Knight of Pan. And if we look at the literal definition of it, it is reference to a round hill. Again, this is Mickey's last name, played by Harrelson. This is another reference to his dad in the JFK assassination. It's interesting to me that Tarantino is from Knoxville. And in 2009, I shit you not, the name Knox was entered into the popular baby name list thanks to Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. Thanks, guys. So, again, they want this name to ring, and it has the simple value of 64, which is the same as Klaus and Amon. Yes, I know. Look how this links up with the movie as well with that 64. In one of the intro scenes, Mallory discusses a vision that she has had in which she sees Mickey riding a red horse. And she sees that they don't die, they're angels. And this comparison goes on to say she's referencing Revelation 6:4 and the second horseman bringing about war. You see furthermore in the Bible that the Red Rider's primary function is not to kill people himself, but to remove peace from the earth, prompting man to kill his fellow man. Now, interestingly, the caduceus is also seen as a sign of peace, one of the origin stories being that it was put between two warring snakes to bring peace to them. And again, peace symbols are always unique, right? If you look at the traditional peace symbol, it's an inverted cross with broken arms, sign of the Antichrist. But so in any case, in keeping in tone with not killing himself, although Mickey does do that as well, he does incite the prison riot with his words, and that's the true power of this film, is the dialogue, especially from Mickey. So all of that is genuinely fascinating to me. Remember, Dumbo is a 64-minute movie as well. But notice over here, let's look at Mickey and Mallory. All right, 16 letters total there. That's the tower card. Of course, the initials reducing down to that 414. Keep it in mind because I'll come back to it. But again, here you can see these references to a state of emergency, national emergency. The numbers 227 written out, references to the U.S. banking collapse and a gunshot wound. Now, let's really step into this. When we look at Wayne Gale, of course, his initials give us our 237 reference. But again, notice that simple value of 93 and the references to Saturn and the end of days, as well as these other major pieces. So Gale is revealed to be a demon moments before he is shot towards the end of the movie. But Gale feeds on all of this, right? The media. There's a brilliant segment. If you've not seen the movie, you've got to watch at least the interview scene, but it takes place on a show called American Maniacs. So check out the numerology there, giving you the 33 reduction, 15 letters on the devil card again. And notice the references here to Judgment Day, Michael Jackson, and The Future. So The Future is the song that ends this movie, but we'll get back to that a little later here. What I want to get into is what I find to be one of the most fascinating parts of this research, and that is figuring out this Super Bowl. So you can see here the film makes an explicit point for us to know that it is Super Bowl Sunday, the day the prison riot takes place. And of course, prior to the interview, we're shown some celebration footage from the Super Bowl. And my big question was, well, what Super Bowl is that from? It could have been, right, either Super Bowl 27 or 28, because the Dallas Cowboys happened to play in both Super Bowls and win both years. But so, initially I thought with when the movie was made and edited, it really could have been either one. But what stands out here above all else are a couple of things. First of all, the fact that we see Harper and Irvin, numbers 80 and 88, all the things we could glean there. Drop that 0, there's your 888. But so this is actually from Super Bowl 27. This is Super Bowl 28, and there is an incredibly similar shot of those same two men holding their hands after the game. And this one has Coke in the background, which we'll get to later. But notice that they've switched sides. They've mirrored, right? So this is the one that we're going to look at. Since it is the one that is shown in the film, we want to see Super Bowl 27. But again, thinking about the fact that either of those Super Bowls could have been conjured up, I think is really fascinating, because 27 and 28 gives us 55. And of course, you can see all of the connections there: Satan, Rogan, New Age, Dumbo, you name it. But regardless, the two players that are there are Harper and Irvin. And so you can see that simple coding of 138, and that's Pez theory. And remember, you see Donald Trump come up there. And I'm always talking about this Misfits album, Bullet, with JFK being assassinated. And the B-side is We Are 138. And of course, somebody did a mock-up with this same cover reflecting Trump. So I think that is incredibly, incredibly fascinating to consider. And again, thinking about the numbers on their jerseys giving us that 888. And if we can just pull this up here, you can keep this in connection with all of this Dumbo research. Donald J. Trump, Jumbo Jr., David Blaine White, all the same. Project Bluebeam, the next big one, it's all in there. All right, this is a huge set of information. I also want you to take account of this number written out, 187. Police code for homicide, but we'll come back to it. Now notice here as well, Harper and Irvin also have the same coding as Roland Emmerich, director of Midway in 2012, and Trump's new slogan, Keep America Great. There's that date, August 8th, that 88, June 4th, 64, and Black Sunshine. Now, there is absolutely some Black Sunshine in this film, so let me just pull it up for you really quick here. It's an inverted flag in a very clear black sun after Mickey accidentally kills the Native American. And again, they end up being bit by the two snakes. But how incredibly fascinating, all of that. So, in case you're wondering how I came to know that it was Super Bowl 27, really it comes from the fact that you see here that there are no armbands being worn, and here there are, and this is indoors, this is outdoors, again, on and on. And I'm going to talk about Super Bowl 27 quite a bit here, actually, because it is very important that we discuss this event. But so let's take a look at some things here. Remember that NBK has a simple value of 27. It's 27 songs on the soundtrack. It's a death number, Club 27, Trump's age inverted, 72, on and on. But what I want you to hone in here is that it took place in Pasadena, California. And remember, Pasadena shared coding with all of those wonderful things that we were talking about towards the beginning of this video. So there's that for you on that side of the screen. And since we're going to be talking about the idea of keys to the city later, here's its connection as well with the Big Lebowski movie. Again, all the area codes, or excuse me, zip codes in Pasadena start with 911. and Pasadena, California is 18 letters. Again, look at all the other things located there. But again, this is where the Rose Bowl took place. I don't know why I'm saying Rose Bowl. Oh, that's the name of the fucking stadium. So, took place at the Rose Bowl, and notice that the Cowboys, of course, with that score of 52 there. But I guess what I want to point out here is some preliminary information. So you can see here Rose Bowl known as America's Stadium, and of course with the Cowboys and that 52 points, that is the Jewish value for NBK. So we have both the Jewish and the simple taken care of here. It's also the number of victims in their killing spree. Now, interestingly, it's the Cowboys' 6th Super Bowl appearance and their 3rd Super Bowl victory, making their record at the Super Bowl 3-for-3, which is 33, or excuse me, 3-3. You could also look at this as the 3rd Super Bowl loss for Buffalo and the 3rd win for Dallas. There's another 33. It had been 15 years since the previous Cowboys Super Bowl victory. Again, chapter 33 refers to the 15th tarot card, Pan. And you can also see here, of course, Cowboys' 34th season, mirroring and adding that for our 77. Interestingly, Natural Born Killers had a budget of 34, I think, 1,000 million, whatever, 34. But notice as well as the 7th Super Bowl in the greater Los Angeles area. But what I want you to really hone in on here is that this was originally scheduled to take place at what is referred to as the Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe, Arizona. So if we take a look over here, look at where this thing is located. On the 33rd and 111th parallels. Oh my God. You've got it all here. Of course, 111. The English value for that is 666. And that to me is stunning. Absolutely stunning. And when you look at this coding here, it's very interesting because you see Sun Devil Stadium, same as Donald Trump Dumbo, 2019, ringing in unison. That presidential alert stuff I was talking about. And look at this. Tupac Amaru Shakur. Now, how could that possibly tie in with 2019? I'm going to talk about Tupac pretty extensively towards the end of this video, but I am going to point out at this particular moment his album All Eyes on Me, released in 1996. He's making a W, which is 23, and 23 years after this album's release is now 2019. I'm going to talk about towards the end of this presentation how he's connected even further in understanding the importance of all of this. But so take a look at Super Bowl 27 written with the Roman numerals here. There's that symbol at 219. Let's make America great again. Trump assassinated. You see the stock market collapse. 33 degrees. All of it. Okay. Mickey and Mallory fire what the nation is said to have caught. Subliminal programs in this reference to Ordo Lapsit Exilis. So if we're looking at that, I believe right here, you can see that they are named after the stone that fell from heaven, the fabled jewel that is said to have fallen from Lucifer's crown during the war in heaven, in which the occult is used as a symbol of enlightenment, of the descent of divine light from the mind of God into the mind of man. You can see here in Freemasonry, symbolized as the blazing star, often depicted as falling from heaven. Going on to write its significance in the all-seeing eye and sun symbolism as well. So, wow, a lot to take in there, right? And in going forward here, and in thinking about Mickey and Mallory fire, really quick here, one thing I forgot. In the coding for Mickey and Mallory, you do see Queen of Swords is referenced. And so this is a very important card, because the Queen of Swords, you can see here, she sits in the clouds with a decapitated head and a sword in her other hand. So now, of course, this having all sorts of connections to death symbolism, but you can see she is the fair witnessing mind who removes all illusion and sees the real that is masked by personal reality. How very fascinating. But let's get back to our Super Bowl stuff here real quick. So as you can see here, in the Super Bowl uploading the entire game, they call it the start of a dynasty. So if we look into the coding for that, you see Donald Trump shot in the head, Flight 237 again from Get Out, and a Saturnian conspiracy. How very interesting. Now at Super Bowl 27, the coin toss was done by O.J. Simpson. Oh shit. He's a big influence on the NBK narrative. Juice happened to play 11 NFL seasons, 8 years for the Buffalo Bills, of course, also playing at 27. So there's another 8 and 11 if you want it. Now, interestingly, when we look at OJ, his victims were found on June 12th. Now, this was George H.W. Bush's 70th birthday, and so this is the first year that he is not in office. And if I can pull this up for you without taking too long here, yes, you can see these birthdays connected with that June 12th date. And again, David Rockefeller, all the other pieces, the 216 connections, but all very compelling to me. Again, talking about the I-405 car chase. Now, the halftime show was performed by Mickey Jackson, the 8th child from the Jackson family, who began his career in 71. Now, let's listen to this little blip here. I really hope I don't get flagged for this, so let's check this out.
Today, we stand together all around the world, joined in a common purpose to remake the planet into a haven of joy and understanding and goodness.
United in that common goal, joy, understanding, right? And that directly links us back to our book 77 talk, the law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Again, that is right before he sings the song, "We are the world and heal the world." So if we take a look at this for heal the world, that simple value of 131 does give us Super Bowl, and again, Super Bowl 27 held on 131. References as well to JFK, Don J. Trump, the Angel of Death, 11 and 8, the Death Card, all of it. You can see here the film Unforgiven, which we'll talk about later. On and on. So Heal the World, which is Jackson's final song here alongside We Are the World, but Heal the World is from his 8th album, and it peaked at number 27 and said to be the song that he is most proud of. If we look over here, we can see that it is said to be the same medley, We Are and Heal the World, that was performed at his July 7th, 7/7 memorial in 2009 at Staples Center in LA. Now, 99 days later, the director's cut of Natural Born Killers is released. How fascinating. So again, very interesting how OJ and Michael Jackson fit the narrative described in Natural Born Killers, parodying what we can't get enough of, right? Jackson with the accusations of sexually assaulting children, which is still, when did the Neverland thing come out? Very recently. And of course, OJ is never far from the public eye. But notice that the national anthem that year was performed by Garth Brooks. Now, he's not nearly as controversial as the other two from what I could find. But I do think it's worth mentioning that the album he put out before he performed was this one right here, The Chase. And you see, of course, the Masonic symbolism here. But do notice that he did have that weird split where he tried to create this Chris Gaines character and they made a fake behind the music and all this weird shit to try to give that thing legs, and it just didn't work. But again, he tried that for a good amount of time, and I'll leave you a really interesting link for that actually. So let's get back to the movie though. So with all these musicians, let's look at Leonard Cohen real quick here, because the movie begins and ends with a song from him, right? Waiting for the Miracle and the Future, respectively. So Cohen just so happened to die on November 7th, there's your 77 again, 2016, the eve of the presidential election. Yet his death was not announced until 11:10. And so just to bring it up for you on this side here, that is the English value for perfect illusion, Donald John Trump, all of these things, Zion's coming king, California annihilated, hold on to all of that. But so now notice his connection to 2009. He did write the incredibly popular Hallelujah, named Greatest Song Ever by Blender in 2009. But so now, that aside, let's get back to the movie here. So in this bit prefacing the live interview, there's a Time magazine bit brought up here. And of course, right, all of this connected to Pan, the devil, Kronos, whoever you want to call it, with time, Saturn. And you see, of course, Mickey on here, but it says murder on Route 666. So if we look into that phrase, there you have the reference to July 23rd, that birth date for Woody, accepting the mark of the beast and the number 154 written out. Of course, that simple value mirrored gives us a 666. Now, 154 written out, that's really interesting, because that's the simple value for Oliver Stone and mass murderer, which is what Mickey corrects Gale when he says he's a serial killer. Now you also see here the law of Thelema, the number 216, the number 144, which we've talked about both extensively. And you see as well here ritual, sacrifice, and Trump family. So let's move into this last leg here. And again, give me just one moment. So yeah, that is a little more hardcore than I would have expected for y'all there. But keep in mind, right, Stone did play really extreme music in between takes to keep everybody on edge for this film. But so, in thinking about this number 154 in connection with all these other bits, remember we've been talking so much about 227. 22 times 7 is 154. Now, let's get back to this though, because the last commercial we see is the notorious Coca-Cola bear, always cool, always Coca-Cola, whatever commercial where they watch the Northern Lights. And so it's really interesting that 227 just so happens to be International Polar Bear Day, and that originated 25 years ago in 1994. So there we have all of those numbers coming back to us again. And take a look here at Coca-Cola, simple value of 53. Remember my discussion of the stork from this year's Economist World In cover. All of those numbers added together gave us 53. So now again, you can see here with Coca-Cola, CC 33, both words, 4 letters, 44. We get a 77 if we add it all together. Now, allegedly, they were not happy that their commercial was used in this movie, but I think we all know that that is complete bullshit. They knew what it was, and they knew it would be amazing publicity for them. So, the ad that is used, though, debuted in 1993, and it's actually titled Northern Lights. So I have for you here, because I don't want any horse shit over this, from Coca-Cola, discussing the origins of this commercial. And so now you can see here that it debuted on the 1993 Academy Awards. They were the 65th Academy Awards, held on March 29th, again the 88th day of that year. Shit you not. But let's get back here. You look at the Northern Lights coding, and you have that 187, which I told you to hold on to. References to the Brotherhood of Death, Trump 13, again, connected to that death card. Putin and Trump, the Saturn death cult, controlling reality, major pieces. So again, in looking at that premiere of the commercial on 3/29 of 93, the amount of days in between that and the release of Natural Born Killers can be counted as 515. Again, the apocalyptic number given to us in Dante's Divine Comedy. Now, an interesting thing about the Northern Lights. In medieval times, auroral events were seen as signs of war. And what's so very interesting is if you pay attention in the film, right after Mickey says he's a natural born killer, it plays the same sound that it plays in this Coca-Cola commercial. And I'm not going to play any of it on here because I'm not going to give him any excuse to tag me. But do notice the cause of these sorts of events come from coronal mass ejections, right? The sun displacing huge amounts of energy. For those of you familiar with BP Earthwatch, he talks a whole lot about these and their connection to things such as CERN. So there is a lot to be gleaned from that. But now, it's really important that we talk about polar bears for a minute here. So let me pull up Prison Riot for you on the right side of your screen. Again, because that is what Mickey causes with his words. And again, you can see the Aquarius age is part of that. But notice here, when we're talking about polar bears, it is the poster child for global warming. GW 723, right? Cause of the apocalypse in Emmerich's 2012 movie. You'll also notice that always Coca-Cola has that symbol of 134, same as global warming, and the catalyst, and the number 31, which is actually incredibly important. I'll try to remember to get to the adjustment card today. But take a look at this as well in thinking about polar bears, right? Because why, of all things, were they in here? So here we have the god-awful people at the World Wildlife Foundation, and their 11, of course, facts about polar bears. But it says here they're actually black, not white. They have translucent fur, and it reflects visible light. Beneath it all, it's jet black. So again, they're representing this dualistic idea being promoted in the film. Now, it's very interesting as well, because in doing this research, I came across this really peculiar set of photographs, and perhaps it'll let us see them, perhaps not. But what we've got here is a collection showing that between the 1920s and the 1960s, there was this incredibly popular trend in Germany of taking photos with polar bears. Now remember, this is absolutely in the time frame we were discussing all of the issues with Emil Kreplin and his institution, and then you have the emergence of these bizarre photos. So again, this man looking like he's got almost a Masonic hand going in there. And so I'm going to scroll through here and just let you see the bizarre nature of some of these. And I'll dismiss these theories as well here. So one of them saying that created by the Stipe company to celebrate the arrival of 2 polar bears at the Berlin Zoo. So the Stipe company didn't do this, and they actually got their big start making elephants. But so go on here, and again we see this nice dualism reference. But he's talking about the connection of this bear to Fanta, which was not founded based on the research that I could find, because Fanta came along well after this bear had been at play, right? He came around the 20s, Fanta's the 40s. But again here we start to see these images of the bear, and this girl, she's got the nice swastika on her shirt there. And of course, right, standing with some decorated officers of the Nazi party. So again, in exploring this, I found this, here's my article on adjustment here. So I'll refer you to this. This is the 8th tarot card, but I'm not meaning to read that quite at this moment. But I found this blog here from a German girl whose mother was actually pictured with this bear. And I thought it would be really interesting to include because she put it up on International Polar Bear Day last year. And she talks about looking into the rumors and saying that no one really knows why that polar bear trend gained the popularity that it did. And so to me, that's incredibly fascinating, all right? So hang with me here. We're almost to the end. But think about that polar bear and those pictures of the Nazis, and that one of the biggest conspiracies out there is the underground Nazi base located in the Arctic, right? So they've got a good 2009 as well, though. So in April of that year, an apparent suicide attempt as a woman jumped into the polar bear enclosure at the Berlin Zoo. Polar bear also has a value of 88. So now, as I mentioned moments ago, the Coke commercial sound triggers the prison riot. So now, that Stateville Correctional Facility where this scene is filmed is located on the 88th parallel. In the film, it is referred to as Batongo Penitentiary, again, BP 216. Again, all the things there that have connected it to everything we've talked about so far. But so notice here, the coding references a number of things. Jam, Billie Jean, and Black or White are the 3 songs performed in a medley by Jackson at Super Bowl 27. And then that finale I talked about is the other 2 songs, but whoa. Notice as well that September 13th and U.S. currency collapse come in. And September 13th, again, we have been talking about how it would likely become and just more and more prevalent as I did this research, how it plays in. So notice here, as we've talked about in the past, that Milton Hershey and Samuel Wilson, the inspiration for Uncle Sam, both have holidays celebrated on September 13th. And again, both of those men died at the age of 88. Now, let me get back to this side over here, because Tupac, of course, happened to be murdered on September 13th of 1996. So I showed you that coding earlier in this video, but let's talk about Tupac appearing in the music video for Natural Born Killers. So in this video, he has a brief cameo at the end in which he is a sniper, and he gives us one eye symbolism this way, and he gives us a little more this way, right? How phenomenal. But now, as I was saying earlier, I wanted to talk more about his album, All Eyes on Me. And again, this song here, which will come up in just a moment, Life Goes On, released September 11th, 1996. But when we zoom in here, you'll notice that his outlaw tattoo is actually covered by his watch, and it says Out LA. And notice as well here the beast, the Black Panther that is above Christ on here, Black Panther BP 216. But so his tattoo saying out LA, I thought had to mean something. And so it just so happened to coincide with the coding for 414. False flag, snakes, the big head, that's the translation of the Big Lebowski. And of course, this referencing to one eye, as I just showed you, he was displaying in the video. Now again, 23 from that W and 23 years later from 96 is 2019. Now, how very interesting that I happen to be thinking about that today, and this article is printed from The Sun, where they're literally circling his fucking forearm, saying that somebody has said that it is evidence he is still alive. TS, just like Tupac Shakur, 2019. All right, this is major. And again, all of the connection that I'm doing for you with this year of the sun. Wow. It really is phenomenal. So anyways, natural born killer is the way it appears in the video that Tupac is in. You see the New World Order and a Trump presidency. Again, that was his final album. And I think that is all phenomenally interesting. Like I said, Tupac Amaru Shakur shares coding with 2019 as well. So, but again, thinking about 216 and back to Batongo Penitentiary, we do have these images of the warden walking down the hallway, and the first numbers we're shown are 223, that inverted 322. And so as he walks down the hallway, we see all the numbers except 219, the simple value for Super Bowl 27 and Let's Make America Great Again, and Trump assassinated. We don't really get to see that one. But 218, 17, and 16, which is the last one that were shown, are all visible. And so, again, 216, the same as the law of the strong, 500, 10, and 5, again, that 515. And again, you can see all of these pieces, the New Age of Aquarius, the Aeon of Adjustment, and Waiting for the Miracle, the song that begins the film. So all of that fascinating. Now, notice here as well, I could not find an actual definition for Batongo, but I did find that its values, right, are the same as Jesus, Lucifer, Masonic, killing the king, all of that. So now we're rounding the bend here. I know this is a long video, but this is well worth your time, I promise you. So before the prison riot, Mickey refers to himself as fate's messenger as he is discussing the idea of fate in connection to why he is the way he is. So not only does that phrase give us a reference to 64, again the same as Knox and Klaus, but notice that its simple value is actually 156, the same as 666, 33, as above, so below, 828, right? These Pez theory numbers, all of this, you can see it on the right side of your screen too. Remember, that was the same as Harper Irvin as well. Notice as well here, Battle of Midway, Planet Trump, America's Stadium, where Super Bowl 27 was held. Cafe, breakfast, lunch, the first words that we really see, right, on a sign in this movie. It's all so brilliantly here. And again, Planet Trump appearing on this 2017 World End cover with, of course, the 8 cards, Judgment and the Star being the tilted ones. That coding came up earlier as well. And we've talked about this at exhaustive length. So let's move back here. I want you to also hone in on 156 having this first Sunday coding. Hold on to that. Now, somebody who strongly believes in fate is referred to as a fatalist. Simple value of 88. There you have it. There it all is. The New Age, Get Out, Polar Bear, Pangolin, Whitman, False Flags, Trump and Vladimir. It's all right there. So take a look here at Mickey Knox as well, our fatalist. And notice his coding with illusions, the Saturnian age. Again, when we look at the 11 stars, the 11 columns, and talking about this ratification of the U.S. Constitution, you see here they talk about, in the end, returning to the Saturnian age, right? Maintaining peace as they call it and see it. Oh, it's phenomenal. So now, in these scenes, he's also referring to a childhood dream in which he is a bloodthirsty rabbit that kills all the other animals, and his name is Mr. Rabbit. And you see there that coding for Black Sun, the Roman numerals for 2019, David Blaine, references to Thoth and the moon. You also, of course, have the references to wisdom, so hold on to that. Now, of course, the most profound line is when he says that he's a natural-born killer. So you can see here these references. But I want you to see as well the full-on phrase, I'm a natural-born killer, because it's 20 letters. That's the Aeon card. That's the Judgment card. And you see here the greatest hoax ever, reference to a number of dates. You also see 141 written out. Now, that is the same as World War III. But I believe it is also the same as members only, which, since we're all the way here, this was the 66th episode of The Sopranos in which Tony is shot. Notice that it is 52 minutes long, and for those of you really paying attention, the song Comes Love is what plays while Tony bleeds out on the floor, and that's actually the song that I began this video with. So you keep looking through here and you see 156 written out. Again, a number we were literally just talking about with Fate's Messenger. You also have the Secret Conspiracy and NYC November Marathon. Now this is the last bit for today, and I don't know why it caught my eye, but it really did. And so I looked into November New York City Marathon, and I found that the TCS New York City Marathon will be held on November 3rd of this year. So you can see November 3rd, 11 times 3, of course, 33. But if you add this date here, as I have done, you also get 33. And it's the last day of the 44th week. So 44 and 33 is 77. Now, what's really stunning about this is I've actually talked about this day, and you can see it's actually just a stone's throw away down here, that it is the 888th day since the release of Kathy Griffin's decapitated Trump photo. How fucking interesting. Now, what's also worth noting is this is the most popular marathon in the world, just referenced as the New York City Marathon, and there it is, President Donald J. Trump. Psychotronic weapons, just like the ones over in Pasadena. Psychological operation, you see Woody Mickey Harrelson, the reference to natural-born killers, in the phrase, "We will unite the world." Now you also see here 33 is the key. So now all of this clicking in with why so much attention is being given to Nipsey Hussle. So I do remember him from back when, and when his album The Marathon came out, I did enjoy it. But do notice here, TNM 2013 33, released on 12/21. That's at 33. 11 letters, it's Lust card. Notice the values for it. Death sentence, 88. It Will Rife and Jack Scagnetti. This is the detective that represents law in NBK and who is turned into a fucking Pez dispenser by Mallory in room 8, the adjustment card. So now notice here, of course, as has been discussed, Nipsey was sacrificed on 3/31, which does give us a reduction to 33. And the time between his death and that New York marathon on November 3rd is 218 days, which can otherwise be seen as 7 months and 4 days. So again, if we look at that as a 74, we were just looking at that number up here with Batongo. But again, if we jump down, you can see 31 weeks, 1 day, again, giving us that 33. Now, that symbol of 218, 9/11 Part 2, the stock market crash, Book of Revelation, and reference to the film Now You See Me Too, also starring Woody Harrelson. And so, of course, this was also a number seen in the hallway that the warden was walking down in the penitentiary. Now, notice here as well that Nipsey shares coding with Tony Soprano, 888, 322, all numbers that we've discussed throughout this video. And it's also linked with the first purge and the numbers 13 and 18. So if you add those together, it's 31. So hold on to that for just a moment. And let's take a look here at the organization that is going to be funding this race, TCS, for just a moment here. So again, here is the information on this marathon. If you want to see it by the numbers as they put it, let's scroll over here. There's your 44 and 22. Let's add them for 66, right? All the things. But so what I really want you to, well, I guess I need to go back one here. What we really want to take a look at is Tata Consultancy Services. And what I really want you to see is their logo. So take a look at this. Isn't that just the most beautiful 77 at the end of all of this? And how it links up with all the things. Remember, Tupac also died at 25 and mirrors that for that 77 as well. Oh. So when we look at the abbreviation TCS, we see the symbol excuse me, of 42. And that's the same as Tata, NYC, War, Big Bang, Gun, all of it. And when we look into the coding for Tata Consultancy Services, we see Freemasons of the Illuminati, End of the World as We Know It, and a reference to Revelation 13:18. Again, adding those together for 31. And thinking about all of this, right? Super Bowl 27 taking place on the 31st day, and 31 frankly being one of the most important numbers in understanding the book of the law. But so 13:18, we also saw just a moment ago in Nipsey Hussle's coding. So when we look at that in Revelation, we find it is the beast out of the sea, which has the simple value of Super Bowl Sunday, as well as American Revolution, and the beast is the Messiah. So again, in that verse, it says this calls for wisdom. And again, as we just discussed a moment ago, wisdom comes up with the Roman numerals for 2019 and Black Sun and all of those big major pieces. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and that number is 666. And that brings us back to that number being connected to 216. And remember, as we saw here, Detective Jack Scagnetti has that symbol of 216. So all of that, so incredibly compelling to me. I really hope I made as good a case of it as I could. I've got this one last bit to include here because it's this really bizarre interview from Oliver Stone, and it was conducted on November 8th of 1977. And again, as I've been discussing, that's when Emmerich's Midway film is going to be coming out. But in this interview, he talks about somebody eating bad meat, getting mad cow disease, and killing a bunch of people. And again, I just think that's so interesting because that's the premise for, right, Zombieland. But in any case, all of that aside, I know this video is on the longer side, but there's so much to go over, and I hope you see how strongly all of these connections are in place here. Again, all of these 33s, and we connect that with the Book of Lies and this idea of understanding and all of this beast coding that we've shown you throughout. It really does make that compelling case that there is a lot to look out for as we head towards the latter part of the year here. So one other thing, since we keep seeing this 11 and 8, I've just got to show you this. Again, from the 113th day this year to the date referenced in Sunset Strip, 111 days, 15 weeks, 6 days, 156, number of Our Lady Babylon. So again, I want to just thank everybody for taking the time to watch this video, however many takes it took you to get through. And it's all here. Come back through, read it, do your own research. But again, all incredibly powerful. I told you 616 would come back up earlier on, and so just to tie that in there, if I've got it somewhere close by, yeah, Tupac was born on 616. So there's that last bit to connect it in there for you. So again, thank you all so very much for taking the time, and please be well.